Hey guys, RJ here, and I gotta say, this feels a little bit bittersweet for me. I have really enjoyed this series. I never thought I would get this into it, and here I am, episode 7, just clinging to the edge of my seat the entire time, and what a way to go out for episode 7, and this series in general. There's gonna be Emmys won for this, I'm 100% sure. So let's go ahead and dive into our episode 7 review of Big Little Lies. As always, if you have not seen episode 7 of Big Little Lies, turn this review off, go watch it on HBO, then come back here. The last thing I would want to do is spoil the ending to this show. Alright, so you've all been properly warned at this point. I'm not spoiling anything for you guys. I really hope you've seen episode 7. So let's get down to business here. The opening scene that we get is between Celeste and Perry. Celeste is on the floor, basically gasping for air, and we get these really creepy shots of Perry like being an overlord over her. He's just standing down, like looking down on her like she's nothing to him. And it just drives me insane that this guy that feels like so needy, and clearly this is part of his illness, but he just like constantly like needs her to love him, but then obviously does stuff like this. It's so freaking ridiculous. It drives me up a wall to even see this on camera. And obviously this happens all the time in real life, but to see it acted out in this first scene, and they do a great job of like entering into the scene too, where you hear the shouts playing over the TV coming from the air vent that they're showing in. They're like zooming in on, and you hear more and more ruckus coming. And yeah, that opening scene had a lot of emotions to it. It's not really the way I kind of thought they would start episode 7, but they really came out of the gates barking. Then we move on to this scene between Jane and Ziggy Chapman, where Ziggy is pulling one of my old favorites, which is fake that you're sick and see if your parents will just let you stay home from school anyway. And I do love the way that they just interact in this scene at first. And then, of course, this ends up leading Jane to kind of question him on who the real bully is at school. And she kind of puts her foot down on this. She says, no, like if you are friends with Amabelle, you need to tell me who is hurting her. You don't let friends get hurt like this. So eventually she sits down. She has Ziggy point directly at a computer screen of, all the kids in his class, and he ends up pointing out, of course, Max, one of the Wright twins. I gotta say, I mean, we're kind of vindicated, right? I came up with this theory a couple of, I want to say like in my second episode review, maybe my third, but as soon as we found out that Perry was, violent on a normal basis, I just kind of theorized, and I know that it's a common preconception that kids that are around violence obviously will then output some form of violence. And obviously this isn't always true, but I mean, it's no surprise to me that, these kids are in this home with this violence between their mother and father. And he thinks that that's the way that he should interact with girls, because that's all he's seen at this point. And yeah, it's really powerful to me that, Ziggy actually had, the cojones to finally fess up to his mom, because he realizes that one of his friends is being hurt, and that's never okay. While all this is going on, Madeline is going over. She's seeing the playwright, at his work, because she thinks she saw his wife driving by their house, slowly in the morning. And she's probably right. This girl obviously probably has it out for her at this point. I mean, what wife wouldn't if you knew that your husband had an affair with this woman? And yeah, I mean, clearly she's being followed a little bit, but the way he acts to Madeline when they meet, and just like he gets so grotesque at the end, and he like calls her a rich bitch. And yeah, I mean, he has no justification for this. He was just as bad in this affair as she was. So I mean, I don't know if the anger is just coming out of because he knows it's over, or what's going on there, but I definitely, obviously, I already didn't like him after the last episode, but this one definitely cemented it for me. I'm not a fan of his. Someone else I'm not a fan of, and I definitely had praised before. I'm pretty sure I actually named him one of my MVPs of the week, but yeah, Gordon Klein, you have fallen out of RJ's good graces, and I know that commendation means a lot to you, so I just want to let you know, you went from a guy in episode 1 and 2 wearing sandals, telling your wife to just calm down, and I was like, yeah, like, I hate Renata. This guy is a mild factor in that relationship. And that was wrong. So there's my first wrong part of this show. Gordon ends up kind of being an asshole in this episode, and he comes and threatens Madeline and Jane, mostly Jane, but Madeline's there for the show, and he comes into the coffee shop, and yeah, that whole scene, he really lost my respect. And I just absolutely love the way that Tom has him leave and like asks him multiple times. And then Jane obviously ending up at like basically almost getting turned on by the moment. And then she ends up asking him out, or no, but she thought he was gay. And then she's like, wait, you're not gay? Celeste is finally starting to take the fact that she's probably going to leave Perry seriously. She goes and sees the psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist says, you have to have things ready. You have to have food stocked, clothes ready to go. You want to have the kids being able to be over there, pick up their lives with no issues. And so she goes to the apartment, and I swear to God, like the whole time she is in the apartment, I am just like, Perry's going to show up. Perry's going to show up. Perry's going to show up. Like, I can't deal with this. It's like she's going to be murdered in this apartment, and I'm just like, I'm going to hate this show. But they just draw out that tension perfectly. And eventually she gets a phone call, and it just scared the shit out of me pretty much. And it ends up being Jane Chapman instead. And pretty much Celeste just goes there not really knowing why she wants to meet. And she gets there, and then Jane explains exactly what Ziggy told her earlier that morning, that it is in fact one of her twins that is the bully at their school, not Ziggy himself. And this immediately triggers a reaction within Celeste. You can like physically see her face just change from like originally she's obviously a little bit taken aback, and then she her brain starts ticking. She's a smart woman, so she puts one and one together, and they've already talked about it with the psychiatrist. Kids in the house with violent parents, they're going to pick up on it, and she immediately realizes holy crap, I have to get away from Perry. And another thing about the apartment scene, we finally get the flashbacks with Perry hurting her. It's absolutely ridiculous. He's throwing her over this chair, and he's slamming her up against a wall and just choking her there. And then we see this, he gives her a right hook right against the shower, and she bounces off. She's hit so hard, and God, man, even seeing this on television is just emotionally too much for me. It's ridiculous, to be honest. It was such a charged scene. I didn't think that they would show any of these things, at least not this far, but I guess I shouldn't be surprised with how much we've seen in this series. But yeah, man, they took, this is something that is very, very real in life. It happens to people that we probably will never know about, but yeah, man, they absolutely nailed. I love the way that they're flashing back to her cleaning versus, her dirty past. And yeah, I just love the way that they frame that whole scene. Then we have all of our characters getting ready for the fundraiser, and we get probably one of the other creepiest moments in this episode where Celeste is up showering, and pretty much Perry says, I'm not going to leave without you give me a kiss, and Celeste kisses him, but with her eyes open because she's being smart at this point, keeping her eyes on him at all times. And so she goes downstairs after getting ready, and she's just talking with the boys. One of their teeth is loose, and yeah, pretty much she is just sitting there, and then he brings over her phone, and he hands it to her, and he says, hey, the real estate broker called. I told him that they could come fix the fire alarms on Monday or something like that. And just, oh dear, the shivers I got after that. It was, oh. But yeah, Celeste's reaction to this is just awestruck. She has no, he knows the plan. He knows what she was planning to do. And she knows as soon as she goes and gets in the car with him that something bad is most likely going to happen. And honestly, I'm really surprised that he didn't just pull over to the side of the road and start beating her right there or something. I was just so nervous the whole time they're driving to the party, and luckily they just end up parking there, and you can tell that he's officially losing it. He's freaking out. He knows that he's going to lose her, that she is going to leave, and he's in bargaining mode, hardcore bargaining mode. He is basically I'll change, I have demons, same old lines that Perry, I'm guessing, has sold to her before, and she's not buying it anymore. She's let me out of the car, I'm not dealing with this. Our sons know. One of our sons might be violent because he's obviously heard or seen things. You cannot be sure of what he's seen. And yeah, it was extremely well shot. It was really in the dark, but I really like the way that the lights play off of the character faces when they're leaning in to talk to one another. I thought that was fantastic. And then the way Gordon and Renata end up kind of helping Celeste get out of the car without even knowing it, that was a perfect end to that scene. All drunk principles aside, let's just talk about what ends up happening. So all of the characters start gathering at the party one after another. Madeline is having this issue because she keeps seeing the playwright and his wife there, and obviously this throws her off, and she is just feeling extremely guilty about Eddie. And then Jane shows up with Tom, and obviously there's some friction between Tom and Gordon. And yeah, I really love the way that they kind of bring all these characters together. And there's a lot of moving around within the party because you have oh, by the way, I have to give a shout out to Eddie. He absolutely nailed that song. I don't know if that's actually Adam Scott's voice, but if so, he's got some pipes down there. I actually enjoyed that scene a lot. But yeah, there's a lot of moving pieces around the party. They're moving back and forth. Eddie is like going over to sing, and then Bonnie is up on stage singing, and they're all just like moving about the party. And eventually Madeline kind of loses it, and she says, like she basically just darts away from the table crying. And so Jane goes after her like good friends do, and she gets they walk down the steps we've seen this whole time that have the caution flags around them that Madeline's walked by a million times. And I thought this is when it was going to happen. I thought she was going to trip and fall or something stupid like that, and I was like, please just don't kill Madeline. I really want her to live through this. And lucky it's just her ending up telling Jane Chapman that she cheated on Eddie, and she feels extremely guilty about it, and she doesn't know how to tell him, and she's having this emotional breakdown. And I mean, it's just, I find it almost ironic, the fact that she's complaining about this small issue in her relationship. And I think that's kind of the point, is she is, I mean, it's okay, I wouldn't call it a small thing, but compared to like what Celeste and Perry are dealing with, the troubles between Ed and Madeline are probably going to go away after this, because she's going to realize what she has in Eddie, who, by the way, thank you so much for not ruining him as a character. He is a good guy, and I am so happy that he didn't turn out evil. So still in the party, Celeste goes and talks to Renata. I know, of all people, why Renata? Why? But yeah, she goes and talks to Renata, and obviously it's because she ends up telling her that Amabel wasn't being bullied by Ziggy. It was actually her kid. And I mean, you can see Renata's like look on her face like, no, that can't be right. Obviously, because Renata's always right. But yeah, she ends up saying like, okay, like, thank you so much for telling me. And pretty much Celeste is planning to get the kids out of the home to the apartment, away from Perry, as far away as possible. And she basically goes and steals a stranger's cell phone to call the nanny, have her take them over to this address. And yeah, I like the way that she's doing all this in public, because obviously she doesn't know if she leaves the party alone with Perry, she might not live to see the next day. So Perry comes down the stairs, sees Renata and Celeste and Madeline standing there, and he pretty much tries to force his way into talking to his wife and getting her alone and probably doing terrible things to her. And then, of course, Jane eventually snaps. She realizes, she grabs Madeline's arm really tight. And of course, this is because Perry is Jane's rapist, right? I called this in my theory video, which I'll probably link down in the video description as well. But yeah, I mean, clearly I thought all along, probably since the second or third episode, I was like, wow, this guy is a freak. I would not be surprised if that was Jane's rapist. And lo and behold, it is. And I love the fact that Madeline and Celeste don't even need a word from Jane. They immediately realize what's going on with her, just like the reaction on her face, how frightened she is. She physically jumps back when she realizes who Perry is, and just that whole little scene right there with those three together, that was perfect. Perry rushes in and they cut the scene to each of the women giving their testimony. And I absolutely love this scene because they don't actually provide any sound for us for any of their testimony besides Celeste at the end. There's just a little static coming through, basically blocking it. And yeah, I love that. We see the emotion from their faces as they recount this story from hell, and they're trying to be, open and honest. But obviously, as we learn at the end of this, they're all lying about something. Of course, we end up learning what that lie is, but first let's talk about the fight scene that we see, and obviously we get this in bits and pieces, but it was still very emotional, very strong, and I mean, Perry is just like walloping on all of these women, mostly Celeste, but like throwing these other women to the side, and Renata's like standing there punching him, and basically Madeline like climbs on the back of him at one point, and Jane is just like ripping his arm down, and like he's just like throwing them all to the side because he's obviously a lot bigger than both or most of them are, and yeah, so then he's starting to kick Celeste and stuff, and the MVP of this show, official MVP, and I had no idea this is who the good character would be in the end, but our girl Bonnie, man, she is so clutch following Perry down there, because she's just standing around the corner watching the scene unfold, and then she sees her opportunity, she sprints in while they're all kind of like keeping him busy, and she just shoves his ass right off those steps, and oh my gosh, that was exactly the way I needed that scene to end. And obviously, this is what all of the women are lying to the police about. They say that Perry tripped and fell backwards, and they all had to act very sad and very emotional about it because they end up going to his funeral at the end of this episode. But clearly, they all know what really happened. He was beating on her, and he got pushed by Bonnie. And yeah, he met his end. I am so happy he died. This was probably the best ending I could have hoped for from this show. They didn't turn any characters bad besides, I'd say, Gordon just really annoyed me this episode. But in general, like, Eddie wasn't a, pervert or anything like that. Chloe was a good kid. So was Ziggy. In general, this was one of the best ways I think they could have ended the show, and I am very happy about it. Well, guys, that's pretty much it for me. I have really enjoyed reviewing this series, and just to thank all of you guys for commenting and giving me your theories, your thoughts so far. I've really enjoyed doing this show, and I'm going to keep doing a ton of shows like it. I'm actually doing a 13 Reasons Why I have episodes 1 and 2 posted now at the time of this recording, so I'm going to be doing all 13 of those episodes, the Netflix original, and yeah, just subscribe to us here on YouTube if you want to see more of our content. We're going to be doing a ton of shows over the next couple of months, including Game of Thrones and Silicon Valley and a few others, but yeah, just subscribe to us here on YouTube. Follow us down in the video description. There's all of our social media links down there. Like this video if you liked it, dislike it if you hate me a ton and you never want to see me do these again. So yeah, guys, I really enjoyed this series. I have nothing else to say about it, and until next time, guys, we'll see you soon.